Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine, if you will, the year 1610, the stone walls of a Hungarian castle, and they're echoing with screams, not battle cries, no, something much worse. Unspeakable horror. You have this woman, Elizabeth Báthory, nobility, right? And she's sitting in a bath. But it's not water. It's this dark, thick liquid, maybe even steaming a bit in the cold air. Her skin, pale, aging, is glistening crimson. See, she believes this ritual, this bath, it's going to restore her youth, her beauty, her power. But the girl whose life force is now in that tub, she'll never see another sunrise, barely 16, a servant girl. And her crime, apparently she accidentally pulled the Countess's hair. Just pulled her hair. And for that, she paid with her life. Everything. Today we're diving into this chilling story, Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess, a name that just screams cruelty centuries later. Our mission here is to try and understand the woman, yeah, but also the world that kind of created her, and what her story maybe still tells us about, well, human nature.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating, or maybe terrifying, is how that image, that horror, it just grabs you. But it immediately makes you ask,
Why?
how? To really get a handle on someone like Bathory, you absolutely have to look past the sensational headlines, the vampire stuff. You need to dig into the foundations. Her family, the era she lived in, which was brutal, and the whole psychological landscape, really.
Mm-hmm.
So this deep dive, it's not just about what happened, but why it still matters.
Yeah.
How these old, dark stories connect to these, timeless questions about power and the darkness that can exist in people.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. 1560. That's when Elizabeth Báthory is born. And not just into any family, one of Hungary's most powerful.
Mm.
The Báthory name, it carried immense weight across Eastern Europe. You hear stories, dragon slayers, warriors, vampire hunters even, political power brokers definitely.
Well, absolutely. They're a huge deal.
But this noble bloodline, as the sources suggest, it seems it came with a pretty heavy price.
And the context of the 16th century is just vital here. Power wasn't just significant, it was absolute, especially for families like the Bathories. And for them, generations of, inbreeding, it had concentrated not just wealth and land, but also, disturbingly, these seeds of mental instability, maybe violent tendencies. Her uncle, Stephen Bathory, known for just terrifying rages, sadistic treatment of prisoners, enemies. And then there was her aunt, Clara, rumored to be into the dark arts, teaching young Elizabeth about herbs, potions, rituals, blurring that line between, say, folk medicine and something darker, like witchcraft. So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it, how much of her later cruelty was, baked in, and how much was learned from just watching the adults around her.
Right. Because it gets really interesting here. Young Elizabeth, the sources say she was beautiful, intelligent, educated even. 4 languages, could discuss philosophy. She had that noble bearing. But behind closed doors in the family quarters, the lessons were different, completely different. Get this. At age 11, she witnesses her first execution. A peasant, accused of stealing grain, brought before her father. And the sentence wasn't quick. It was slow, deliberate, a message. They stripped the man, bound him, left him in the courtyard to freeze to death. And the family, they watched. From inside, warm. Elizabeth supposedly pressed her face to the glass, didn't look away, not even when his fingers started snapping off from the frostbite.
That detail is
Yeah.
it's absolutely crucial. She actually confided later to her servants, apparently, that this was the moment she grasped the true nature of power. Her words were something like, not just the ability to grant life, but the far more intoxicating ability to take it away slowly while watching the light fade from someone's eyes.
Wow.
Yeah, so this wasn't just, a kid seeing something horrible. This was a profound, chilling internalization of a really dark philosophy, directly influenced by her environment, by the brutal reality of noble authority back then, where, frankly, the lives of peasants meant almost nothing.
Okay, fast forward a bit. Elizabeth turns 15. She's married off to Ferenc Nadasdy, known as the Black Knight, a serious military commander. Now, it was an arranged marriage, sure, but the accounts we have imply Ferenc wasn't exactly an unwilling participant in Elizabeth's. Let's call them developing tastes. In fact, maybe he was her first real teacher in the art of inflicting pain.
Ferenc's role here is really fascinating and disturbing. He spent a lot of time away fighting the Ottoman Empire. Brutal campaigns, necessary perhaps from their perspective, but incredibly violent. And he didn't just come home with battle stories. He came home with interrogation techniques, torture techniques, learned from enemies, maybe even allies. Their honeymoon period, if you can even use that term, was reportedly spent down in the castle dungeons, experimenting on servants who'd done something wrong. That's what the accounts suggest. She learned how to use hot irons, needles, knives, almost like a surgeon, but for pain. She discovered the body's capacity for agony,
Yeah.
but also how the mind could just break long before the body gave out. And the key thing, She found a rush of excitement, a thrill in causing this pain, something apparently missing from the rest of her privileged, noble life.
So during these early years while Ference was around, the killings, the really extreme stuff, it was sporadic, kept hidden.
Exactly. Carefully managed. Maybe a servant girl beaten to death for breaking something valuable. Body quietly buried. Story concocted. She ran away, maybe.
Or a stable boy found dead, looks like an accident, kicked by a horse, but the injuries don't quite add up.
Precisely. Plausible deniability, at least within the castle walls. But then, 1604, Ference dies. Officially, from illness. Elizabeth is 44 now, starting to notice signs of aging. And for the first time ever, she has total, complete autonomy. Unchecked power over her lands, her money, her people.
And that's when everything changes. The real horror begins.
It really does. And her obsession, that specific focus on blood, it seems to have ignited almost by accident. Story goes, a young servant girl was helping Elizabeth dress, accidentally snagged her hair in a brooch, pulled it, hurt her.
Ow. Yeah, I can imagine the reaction.
Elizabeth apparently spun around, slapped the girl so hard her ring cut the girl's cheek. Blood splattered onto Elizabeth's hand, and as she wiped it off, she noticed something, or thought she noticed something. The skin where the blood had touched. It seemed smoother, more supple, younger somehow.
Wow. Real or imagined, that's a powerful idea to latch onto.
Absolutely. Her belief was total. And that belief, that single moment, it drove her down this path of just unbelievable savage cruelty. It marks this horrifying shift, from just general sadism, enjoying inflicting pain, to this specific ritualistic hunt for eternal youth through blood.
So that discovery really lit the fuse. She starts small, right? Experiments.
Yeah, little things at first. A pinprick here, small cut there. Always framed as punishment for some tiny mistake the victim made. She'd collect the blood, maybe in silver bowls, put it on her face like a cream, staring in the mirror for hours, just desperate to see a change.
Oh, it wasn't enough.
No. As months went by, she got convinced she needed more. Larger quantities. Fresh, warm blood. And that meant her victims couldn't just be hurt anymore. They had to die.
The transformation, then, from this cruel noblewoman to, well, a serial killer, it wasn't overnight.
No, it seems gradual, but unstoppable. At first, maybe one servant killed every few months, always young girls, always beautiful. She believed their youth could literally transfer to her through their blood. The killings happened in the lower chambers of the castle, rooms chosen for being soundproof, thick stone walls, heavy tapestries, victims stripped, bound, tortured slowly. While their blood was collected in basins underneath, she even developed this horrific belief that terror and pain purified the blood, made it more potent. So she'd keep them alive as long as possible, days sometimes, before finally letting them die.
The level of planning, the unwavering belief, it points to something more than just cruelty, doesn't it? A complete psychological break.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amplified, terrifyingly, by her absolute power. No checks, no balances.
And she wasn't doing this entirely alone, was she? She had helpers.
Right. As the obsession got deeper, she gathered this inner circle, accomplices, people who either shared her tastes or were just too terrified to say no. 4 main figures emerged from the records. Dodiacentes, an older woman, sort of her personal witch and advisor. Janos Uvari, a dwarf, her bodyguard and executioner. Then Alonior, a servant who helped find and lure victims. And Catalin Betsky, a washerwoman who dealt with, well, disposing of the bodies.
The whole team. Together, they developed what the records actually call a system of murder.
Which raises that awful question about complicity, doesn't it?
Hmm.
How do people get drawn into something like this? This system, it targeted young women, usually servants already in the castle or peasant girls tricked into coming from nearby villages, promises of work, maybe better pay, always chosen for their looks, their apparent health. That was key for Báthory's fantasy.
And the methods, they varied.
Oh, yes. Depending on Elizabeth's mood, the girl's supposed crime, brutal beatings, burnings with hot irons, sometimes precise cuts just for collecting blood efficiently. Her supposed favorite method involved suspending victims from the ceiling by their wrists, and then cutting them systematically, letting the blood drain slowly into a bath she had placed below.
It's almost impossible to imagine living in that castle. The constant fear, the smell.
Exactly. Chede Castle became a charnel house, especially the lower levels. They tried to mask the smell of death with incense, herbs, but you have to imagine it was always there. And incredibly, this went on for nearly 6 years without any official intervention.
How is that even possible?
The feudal system, basically. Nobles had almost total control over their lands and the people on them, the serfs. Báthory had her own little kingdom. That system insulated her. She could literally get away with murder as long as the victims were peasants, lower class. There was no one for them to appeal to. It's a chilling example of how power structures, social norms, can shield horrific evil, especially when the victims have no voice, no power themselves.
So, fast forward again, it's 1609, Elizabeth is 50. And despite all this horror, the rituals, she's still aging.
Right? Time keeps marching on. The woman once called one of Hungary's great beauties now sees wrinkles, age spots. Her reflection mocks her obsession, and the madness deepens. The killings become more frequent. Monthly becomes weekly, maybe even more often.
And she starts to think the peasant blood isn't working anymore.
Exactly. She convinces herself it's losing potency. Their lower breeding, she thinks, makes their life force weaker, so she makes a fateful decision. A truly catastrophic mistake from her perspective. She starts targeting girls from the minor nobility.
Big difference.
Huge difference. She invites them to her castle. Under false pretenses, maybe finishing their education, learning courtly manners, household arts.
And these girls, unlike the peasants, they have families who will miss them. Families with connections, families who will ask questions.
Precisely. That was her undoing. The case of Anna, a distant cousin, only 16. Her mother noticed Elizabeth wearing Anna's distinctive family necklace after the girl disappeared.
Chilling. That must have started whispers.
It did. Words started spreading among the lower noble families. Young women go to Chat's castle. They tend not to come back.
Enter King Matthias II of Hungary. He hears these rumors.
He does. And he sees an opportunity. The Báthory estates are vast, incredibly wealthy. The royal treasury also happens to owe the Báthory family a significant amount of money.
Convenient.
Very.
Yeah.
So when reports of missing noblewomen finally reach the court officially, he acts. He appoints Jurgi Thurzo to investigate.
Thurzo. Wait, isn't that name familiar?
It is. Ironically, he was the Palatine of Hungary, a top official, but also related to Elizabeth's late husband, Ferenc.
Wow. Talk about keeping it in the family. So Thurzo investigates. What makes his case so strong? How does he pull this off against such a powerful family?
Thurzo was smart. He knew he couldn't just rely on rumors. He interviewed over 300 witnesses, systematically. Escaped servants, terrified villagers finally willing to talk, families of the missing, even some local officials who'd maybe looked the other way before but were now under the king's scrutiny. He documented everything meticulously, every count, every name, every horrific detail. He knew anything less would be dismissed.
So it's the sheer volume, the consistency of the testimony.
That plus the physical evidence they eventually found. By late 1610, Thurzo has this mountain of evidence. It's undeniable. Gossip has become documented fact. December 29, 1610, Thurzo arrives at Kissig Castle, not alone. He has soldiers, a royal warrant.
And what they find inside.
It's beyond description, according to the accounts. Bodies of women tortured so recently their blood was still warm. Dismembered remains may be arranged in patterns. And in Elizabeth's private rooms, that large silver tub, filled with what looked like blood, still warm, with chunks of flesh, human hair floating in it.
Oh my God.
Elizabeth herself is found nearby, covered in blood, clearly not her own. And they find her diary, her own handwriting, documenting the crimes, her theories about blood, rejuvenation, meticulous detail. Some parts were apparently so disturbing they were sealed away, never made public.
So with all that, the diary, the bodies, the tub, surely she faced execution, or did being high nobility save her?
You hit it exactly. Not execution in the conventional sense. As high nobility, she was technically above traditional law. And King Matthias, he was wary of setting a precedent, executing a Báthory. That could be turned against other nobles later.
Politics, even then.
Always. So
All
instead, house arrest.
Right.
But her four main accomplices, they faced trial, early 1611. And it became a sensation across Europe.
I bet. What happened at the trial?
Witness after witness testified. The prosecution laid out this picture of systematic murder, torture, on a scale that just shocked everyone. The physical evidence, the torture devices, sketches, it was damning. Faced with certain execution, the accomplices turned on each other, pointing fingers, trying to minimize their own roles.
Desperate.
Completely. All four were found guilty, sentenced to death. Though the methods varied, apparently based on how involved they were perceived to be.
And Elizabeth's house arrest, what did that actually mean?
It meant being walled up alive in her own castle, as cruel as it was, creative perhaps, confined to just 3 rooms and an upper tower, bedroom, sitting room, prayer chamber. They bricked up the doorways, left only small slots for food to be passed in, waste removed. She was never to see the outside world or another human face again.
Walled up alive. How long did she survive like that?
Nearly 4 years. From early 1611 until her death in August 1614.
What was her state of mind? Do we know?
Accounts suggest initial rage, disbelief. Then it apparently descended into a kind of resigned madness, She retreated into delusions, talking to herself for hours, arguing with people who weren't there. Some accounts even claim she saw the ghosts of her victims, described them vividly.
The irony is just staggering. The woman who killed hundreds to stay young and beautiful, trapped, aging, deteriorating with absolutely no one to see it.
Her famous beauty faded completely, unseen. She died in her bed, August 21st, 1614, age 54. Official cause, natural causes. But her story, that definitely didn't die with her.
No kidding. Her crimes were just too shocking, right? They became instant legend.
They transcended historical fact almost immediately. Her body, initially buried in a local church, people complained, said her presence desecrated holy ground. So she was moved eventually to an unmarked family crypt somewhere. The castle, said teacher, abandoned almost right away, became this haunted ruin. Locals still avoid it, apparently.
And the stories grew.
Oh, massively embellished. Within decades, the number of victims ballooned over 650, bathing in blood daily, pacts with demons, black magic rituals. She became the prototype for the female vampire in books and movies. Beautiful, deadly, feeding on the innocent.
But the reality, as historians try to piece it together, still horrific, even without the supernatural stuff.
Exactly. She likely killed dozens, maybe over 100 young women, all in pursuit of this twisted fantasy. That's terrifying enough on its own, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, stepping back from the myths, the vampire tales, what are the real lessons here? What drove this monstrous behavior?
And this is where her story becomes so relevant, even today. Báthory isn't just some historical boogeyman. She's like a dark mirror reflecting things we still grapple with. It's not just about one disturbed individual. It's about the corrupting influence of absolute power. She lived in a world where common lives had almost no value to the nobility. Nobles could literally get away with murder as long as victims were lower class. The whole feudal system protected her, insulated her. For most of her killing spree, zero oversight, zero accountability.
And psychologically?
Well, looking back through the lens of modern psychology, the accounts suggest what we now see as severe personality disorders. A total lack of empathy, a consuming need for control, grandiose self-importance, a willingness, even an enjoyment in inflicting suffering. Classic psychopathic traits, you could argue. And all of that was just horribly amplified by her social position. Plus, you can't ignore the family history. That legacy of inbreeding, the documented mental illness and violence in her relatives, it suggests a predisposition.
So it's this perfect storm, genetic predisposition, maybe absolute unchecked power, and a society that kind of accepted cruelty towards the vulnerable.
That seems to be the terrifying cocktail, yes. But there's another layer too.
Which is?
Superstition, folk belief. We can't just dismiss that. She genuinely seemed to believe in the rejuvenating power of blood. Now, that idea wasn't totally alien back then. The line between medicine and magic was blurry. People believed rituals could have real physical effect.
But she acted on it on a horrific scale.
That's the difference. Her beliefs might not have been unique, but her willingness to act on them, regardless of the human cost, that was different. She had the power to get victims, the isolation to hide the crimes, and the psychological makeup to actually enjoy the process. It was, as you said, a perfect storm of evil.
And amidst all this focus on her, the monster, we have to remember the victims. They get lost in her shadow.
It's so important to remember their humanity. These weren't just numbers. They were real young women, mostly teenagers, 14 to 20 maybe, working to help their families, maybe learn a trade. They were people on the edges of society. Few protections. Easy targets for someone like Báthory. Some names survive in the records. Anna, Kaida, Pola. Each one had hopes, dreams, families who grieved. The psychological scar on the survivors on those communities, it was immense. For generations, just mentioning the Báthory name made people fearful. Her story is a stark reminder. Behind every historical monster, there are forgotten individuals whose suffering built that monstrous reputation.
So, bringing it all together, what does this mean for us now? This story seems like ancient history, a relic from a much darker time. But is it?
Well, the setting is different, obviously, but the dynamics, maybe not so much. That toxic mix of power, isolation, maybe mental instability, it still produces monsters, doesn't it? In every generation. The abuse of power, people looking the other way, evil, hiding behind a respectable face. These are constants, unfortunately. And maybe the most chilling part of her legacy is how it kind of reflects our own cultural obsessions, in a way.
How so?
Think about it. Our society spends billions on anti-aging. We chase these often unrealistic ideals of beauty and youth. We sometimes prioritize our own desires over the well-being of others or ignore systemic problems. Elizabeth Báthory's motivations, that desperate fear of aging, the desire for control over her appearance, they don't feel quite as alien as maybe they should. The difference is one of degree, perhaps, not entirely of kind.
That's a disturbing thought, that the roots of her obsession might echo in our own world.
It is. The chilling insight isn't necessarily that people today would do what she did, but how easily we can maybe dehumanize others or exploit situations when our own desires feel overwhelming, especially if power or privilege insulates us from immediate consequences.
And the ultimate irony, of course, her desperate, bloody quest for youth and beauty, it led to the total opposite. Her name is forever linked with horror, ugliness, decay.
Absolutely. The castle at Cité, it's still there, in ruins. Locals apparently still avoid it. Some say you can hear echoes of screams on certain nights. But maybe the sound we should really listen for isn't the cries of the long dead. Maybe it's the quieter whispers inside ourselves and in our communities, those little voices that warn us when our desires might be getting destructive, when our pursuit of happiness might be causing suffering somewhere else. Elizabeth Báthory clearly stopped listening to those voices if she ever heard them. And the result was this tragedy that still echoes. Her story is like that dark mirror. It shows us the worst possibilities of human nature. And it challenges us, really, to choose a better path. So, something for you to ponder. In what ways do our modern values maybe unintentionally create conditions that echo, even faintly, the unchecked desires that drove Elizabeth Báthory? What are the voices that we need to listen to more closely today, in our own lives, in our own society?